Welcome, my name is Jason, and I'm glad that you're joining with me today. If this is your first time, you're in for a treat. If this is your first time through, a year with us here at Corbett, every March we focus in on one topic, and we talk about it the whole month, and then we don't talk about this thing again all year long. In the past, it's been called Stewardship Emphasis Month. It's been called Giving Month. It's been called Generosity. While all of those things are true and accurate, I'm a bit of a plain person, and I like a straightforward thought and thinking. And that's why I title this, and we've been saying this internally for a while, but we call it Money Month. It's simply just that, because the Bible talks about money, we should too. So we don't shy away from it. We deal with it in the month of March, and we take care of it in that point. And my desire for us over the next 4 weeks is that we would gain a greater understanding of what God has for us and how he talks about the money and the finances that we have. There's a story in the book of 1 Kings, and I want to share it with you today. It starts in the 16th chapter, and we're introduced in this book and in this chapter to the new king of Israel. His name is King Ahab, and his wife Jezebel, who's come from a foreign land. And this is a marriage, quite honestly, that changed the nation of Israel, and not for the better. King Ahab and Jezebel introduced a high level of importance on worshiping a false god, worshiping a god named Baal. And the nation of Israel is not like foreign to idol worship. It has happened before, and God has called them and pulled them away from that. But this time, the Bible calls it, it describes it as it being so much worse than it's ever been before. And it's starting to take a turn for the worse. For those who didn't worship this false idol were being killed. So God did as God does, and he sent a prophet. His name was Elijah to his people to warn them and to tell them to turn away from this, to turn back to him, to come back to him rather than worshiping this false idol, Baal. And he began to warn them and told them that because of this disobedience, a great famine, a great drought is going to go over the land, that no rain will fall until this is taken care of. And you got to understand that when Elijah told this prophecy, this news to King Ahab and the people of Israel, he became a very unpopular guy. In fact, they wanted to kill him. So God spoke to Elijah and told him to run to the east and that he would be taken care of there. So he went and he followed God out into the wilderness, and God provided a place for him, and God promised that he would be taken care of, that he would be fed in the morning with meat and bread from ravens. Of all things, what an amazing way to have your meal delivered to you morning and night by ravens bringing it. And where God had placed him was right beside this amazing brook and this stream that flowed, that provided water to quench his thirst. But remember, there's a drought. God called and said there would be a drought, and there was, and eventually this stream that was helping Elijah began to dry up as well. So God came to him again and spoke and said, Elijah, now I need you to get up and I need you to go to a town nearby called Zarephath. And there you will find a woman, and she will take care of you. And Elijah got up and he followed God, and he walked to this town, Zarephath. And when he went in, he saw this woman and thought, this must be her. And he spoke to her and said, the Lord has told me to come and to talk to you, and I need some bread and some water. And her reply is this in 1 Kings chapter 17, verses 12 through 14. She says, as surely as the Lord your God lives, I do not have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and to make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. Elijah said to her, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you've said, but first make a small loaf of bread for me and out of what you have, and bring it back to me. And then make some for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. her intent was to go and prepare basically her last meal, to eat and to accept her fate, her death. And she was like many who had gone before her, because this famine and this drought had been going on for months already, and many of her friends and family probably would have died. Her neighbors would have died of starvation and thirst. All she had left was a little bit of flour and a little bit of oil. It would have been incredibly valuable to her. It would have been, we understand it, we read it was her last meal. But she gave it up, banking on the words of Isaiah and the promise of God. Elijah stayed with them for a while. And in chapter 18, it says this, after a long time, the third year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah, go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. I want to pause there. I want to back up just for a minute. This transition is like watching a long movie, and you've seen some of it happen, and then they jump some time and they tell you 3 years later. I want you to understand that it's been 3 years since the first proclamation when Elijah said that there would be a drought. It's been 3 years since then, and he's been living with this family. And God's promise has held true, that the jar is still full of flour, and the jug is still full of oil. Remember that promise. Verse 14. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. 3 years. God has provided for them. God has been faithful in his promise. 3 years go by, and God comes back to Elijah, and he says, it's time to go back to Ahab. This has gone on long enough. There's so many people who have died. There's so much unrest, and so many of my people are in pain. I need you to go back to Ahab, and I need you to tell him that rain will soon come, and the drought will soon end. And it was a severe drought. There was barren land. When there is no water, there is no grain. When there is no grain, people don't eat. They had to bring food in from other nations and water in from other nations. It was horrible. And now God is asking Elijah to present himself to the king who's been hunting after him. This is surely a death sentence. But he confronts Ahab, and when they come together for the first time, Ahab says this, is that you, troubler of Israel? He says that to Elijah. Verse 18 says, I have not made trouble for Israel, Elijah replied. But you and your family and your father's family, you have abandoned the Lord's commandments and have followed the commandments of Baal. Elijah challenges him and says, bring all the people out, bring all of Israel out to Mount Carmel. And Mount Carmel was the place where Baal was supposedly to have all of his power. And Elijah says, bring all the people out and let's let the gods decide. Let's see which God is more powerful. We will present offerings and sacrifices to them, and whichever one rains fire down from heaven and burns it will be the true God of Israel, and we will follow him forever. So King Ahab brings his 450 prophets of Baal, and they build an idol. They build an altar to him, and they put a wood on top of it, and they cut up a bull, and they lay the pieces on it, and they begin to chant, and they begin to cry out to Baal. They begin to cry out to him to come and to light the fire. They yell, they scream, they dance, they do all these things. They do this for about 4 hours. They do it from morning till noon, and they are getting frustrated. They begin to cut themselves, and they take swords and arrows and all kinds of sharp things, and they start to cut themselves, and yet nothing works. No fire, nothing. And at about noon, Elijah walks over and he begins to taunt them. And he starts to say, maybe your God's asleep. Maybe your God is so busy that he can't hear you. Maybe you should scream louder. You should yell louder. You should do more of the things that you've been doing. He goes on to do this, and they continue, and they go late into the evening. And by that time, Elijah had enough. And he walks over to them and says, it's my turn. So he took the bull and he cut it and prepared it, and he built up an altar and placed wood on top of it, and he used some significance when he built the altar as well. He took 12 stones to remind the people, and he began to speak to the people to remind them that they are Israel. He took 12 stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel, reminding them who they are. So he built an altar and he put wood on it, and he put the calf or the fattened bull on top of it, cut up. And then he did something kind of odd and kind of amazing. He goes and he asks for 4 jars to be filled with water, and those 4 jars to be poured over top of the altar. The altar he wants to light on fire, he is soaking in water. And he doesn't do that just once, twice. He does it 3 times. He takes 4 jars, 12 in total, and pours it over top of this altar, taking something so precious. Remember, this water had to be shipped in from all over the place just so people could survive. And he asked them to pour it and waste it. And then Elijah prayed a simple prayer found in chapter 18, verses 36 and 37. It says, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are the God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so that these people will know that you are Lord, our God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. And what happened? What happened was fire rained down from heaven, and the bull that was on top burned. The wood that was soaked with water vanished. The rocks and stones that he had built the altar out of began to melt, and the water was gone. Elijah had nothing. In this whole story, the ravens, the woman, the fire from heaven, Elijah had nothing. And he had to depend on God the whole way. But you see, Elijah knew God. He knew his power. He knew his ability. He knew his resources. The story of Elijah is one of God's provision in some pretty incredibly difficult times. And when I read stories, and there are many stories like this in the Bible, when I read stories like this, I can't help but think, but how? And maybe you're thinking the same question, like, how can God provide in such a way? And how can God provide in such a way for me? But how is it possible for him to do that? The very first words in the Bible tell us how. If you go all the way back, you're in Kings. If you continue to turn back to the front of your Bible, get past the table of contents, and you look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, it says this, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. You see, he owns it all. Every part of it, every piece of it, he created, he made, and he gives to each of us out of that abundance. You see, we need to remember that our resources, we need to remember where they truly come from and always seek to honor God with what he's given us. You see, it's God, not you, not me, provides the air in our lungs and the sunshine of the day, the basic needs that we have for life. But it's also him who gives us our food and our shelter, clothing, our employment, our resources that we need for our family. It all comes from him. I have 3 kids who live in my house, and sometimes they eat and they make a mess like as if they are 6 or 10 kids. They really do. It's crazy. You know, but I never want my kids to wonder where the things they need come from. I'm their father, and it's my responsibility to provide for them and to make sure that they're dressed and fed and warm. And I want them to know that they can eat and enjoy all the things that are in my home. My hope is that one day they will arrive at an understanding that I know I did about my own family's home. That all my parents did for me, that all that they provided for me, all of the things that I thought were mine were actually theirs. And I merely had full access to them because I was their child. You see, God provides everything for you. Let me say that again. God provides everything for you. Do you realize how freeing that phrase can be in your life? That God provides everything for you? When we understand and embrace and begin to live out this truth in our lives, the idea that God is the source of all that we have, it starts to provide us with two things. There are two things that happen in our lives. The first thing is that we can begin to relax. Any of you kind of stressed about money and stressed about your finances? This truth takes that stress out of your money and out of your finances. It's not all up to me. It's not all up to you. It's not all up to each of us. It's up to God. It's his business as well. I've shared this story before, but when Marla and I were just starting out and just got married, I was working at a church for free, and she was making $9.25 an hour. Frequently, we would run out of money way before the month ran out, and it was stressful at times. But something that got us through was learning and leaning into the reality that God's in control of our finances. And we were able to start relaxing when it comes to money. The second thing that you begin to understand when you realize that all the resources come from God, that he's in control, is you start to actually change the way that you think. The way that you think about money and your possessions, it's different. Those things are not anywhere near as important as they once were, and they don't have the hold over you that they once had. And you actually can start to feel the freedom to give those things away. I joke about how sometimes we have, or it feels like I have 6 to 10 kids, but there are times in my home that it is filled with kids that are not mine. There are other kids in my house, and my kids offer them snacks and treats and drinks, and they keep coming back, and they let them use our stuff, and sometimes they even let them take our stuff home with them. They are generous with the things that I provide. When you realize that God is the supplier and the provider of everything, you become free to actually live a generous life. One of our core values here, our overarching mission, is to show the love of Jesus, but one of the ways we do that is through a generous life, through living generously, and that is only to exemplify that God's nature is truly generous. You see, he didn't just create the world, but he sustains it and keeps it going, and he continues to bless us every day. You see, he sent his son to redeem this world and to die for us, and God loves us, and that love motivates his generosity towards us. He gave us his only son to pay for our sin, and he continues to give and provide for all of our needs. God's greatest commandment is to love God and to love others. And when we love as he loves, we become motivated to give. And God's giving has purpose. God gave us his son so that we might have eternal life, to live forever in his presence. He gives us money so that we might give with purpose. He gives us material things so that we can accomplish great things in his name. His generosity has the result of freeing people from sin and worry and anxiety about the future. Your generosity can and does do some incredible things. When you give to this church, when you give to God, you provide a place for people to come together and gather and experience community with God and with his people. Your generosity allows the church to reach out to our community, to the world, to actively show the love of Jesus to those who need his love. Our money, all the resources we have, even our bodies, are not our own. Maybe you're listening today and you're thinking, yeah, but Pastor Jason, it's all good. I'm with you, but you don't know my circumstances. You don't realize that if they still made pennies, I wouldn't have 2 of them to rub together. I get it. I hear you. I understand. I do. And I'm not here to guilt anyone. My job today is to remind you who the supplier is. Everything belongs to God because God made everything. Our names might be on the title or the deed, but our ownership is only a temporary arrangement. You see, if my car belongs to God, then I can use it to help a friend who, when his car or their car is is in the shop. If my house belongs to God, then I can use it to host people to come in and have meals and to have a small group into my home so that people can connect and relationships can be formed and Jesus can be shown. If God owns my wallet, then I can use my money to provide for people in need and to build his church. You see, everything belongs to God, and we get to share in what belongs to him. Because everything belongs to God, we can trust in him to provide for us, not just in the good times, but in the bad times. He will provide for us now, and he'll provide for us in the future, just like he provided for Elijah. When it seemed the darkest, God's provision was there. But it takes a mindset to understand and recognize that everything he's given us is his. Would you pray with me? God, I want to thank you so much for what you have given to us. Father, would you open up our eyes this week as we go about our week? Would you open up our eyes to see the things that you have actually given us, to see the things that we have been blessed with, God, and not more importantly than that, not only to see them, but see how they can be used to honor you. God, I thank you for these people and I thank you for this day. In the name of your Son, amen.
Oh, how I long to breathe the air of heaven, where pain is gone and mercy fills the streets, to look upon the one who bled to save me and walk with him for all eternity. And there will be a day when all will bow before him. And there will be a day when death will be no more. Standing face to face with he who died and rose again. And holy, holy is the Lord. And every prayer we prayed in desperation, and the songs of faith we sang through doubt and fear. And in the end, we'll see that it was worth it when he returns to wipe away our tears. There will be a day when all will bow before him. There will be a day when death will be no more. Standing face to face with he who died and rose again. And holy, holy is the Lord. And on that day we join the resurrection and stand beside the heroes of the faith. And with one voice, 1,000 generations sing, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. And on that day, we join the resurrection and stand beside the heroes of the faith. And with one voice, 1,000 generations sing, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Forever
Church, I want to thank you so much for inviting me to be with you today. If you have some questions around this whole money thing, or maybe you're struggling with your finances, we would love to reach out and help in any way possible. We would love to provide resources for you, some teaching for you, maybe some counseling for you around your finances. God has so much more planned for you than even you realize. And money doesn't have to be a hindrance. Money can be a releasing thing. You can find a way to relax in your life because God is in control and He provides it all. If this has meant something to you, maybe it would be great if you could share it and maybe spread this word to your friends and to your family. And I want to invite you back next week as we continue this series on God's finances and our money. We'll talk to you next time.